The John Wick franchise has changed the execution of action in Hollywood, and since the first movie, each one has expanded upon the lore and stories, as well as elevating the action to absolutely absurd levels, making this franchise one of the most consistent and entertaining of all time. Hey guys, welcome back to the video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys my ranking for all 4 movies in the John Wick franchise. Like I said before, these movies have, in my opinion, changed action in Hollywood forever. There are so many movies that take this style of action and put their own spin on it, but again, none of it is possible without this franchise. Before I get into it, let me know your ranking for all 4 of these movies in the comments down below, and while you're down there, make sure to subscribe button so you don't miss any time up in a video where I go live. Both don't waste any more time, let's get right into it. But starting off the list, in 4th place for me is the original John Wick, sitting at a 7.5 out of 10, and I feel like this might be my hottest take of the entire video, but I said this in my spoiler review for John Wick 4. If you want to check that out, the link will be on screen in the description down below. But I really enjoy the movie. It's a very entertaining time. The action is amazing. And like I said, it's the first movie in this franchise, and it absolutely changed action in Hollywood for forever. My problem comes in with the story, because a lot of people are like, oh, it's basic, it works, it's not super lore heavy. They introduce elements, but they don't get too far into the deep end with it. And it's just a classic revenge story. And I think that's fine, but I had a very difficult time connecting with this movie. And this is also the movie I've seen the most times out of any in this franchise, coming in at 3 times. I just had a really difficult time emotionally connecting to this movie, and I feel like the next 2 movies on this list also have that problem, but this one, it's definitely the most basic story, and though yes, again, very entertaining, all of the other movies also just elevate the action. And that's not to say this movie is bad. It's very, very entertaining. It's a very, very fun time, but this is just the basis, and in my opinion, you can like this movie more than others, but you have to admit, pretty much every movie goes off of this first one and just elevates every single element of this movie times 10, and then times 100, and then times 1,000. Next up on the list, in 3rd place for me, is John Wick 2, coming in at an 8 out of 10. I really enjoy this movie. It's bordering an 8.5 out of 10 for me personally. This is only my 2nd time ever watching it, and I'm gonna be honest, I think the action scenes are so much more elevated from the first movie that it inherently makes me bump it up. But also, I really enjoy the more adventurous aspect of it. This is obviously not apart from the first, similar in action, but not really story-wise. Obviously, John is kind of like, okay, I've done what I need to do in John Wick 1. I'm kind of putting this life behind me again because I was kind of thrown back into it. But in this movie, he's thrown even further into it. And we also get to explore all of the elements of just what the lore and the potential of the high table. We get introduced to, I think they're called markers, where if an assassin does a job for you, you have a blood oath to do an assassination for them, and he has to go kill this guy's sister, and he gets double crossed. And it's just such an amazing adventure, and it's the first movie in this franchise to kind of take us on this bigger scale story. And again, I like John Wick 1, but John Wick 2, it elevates what we had in John Wick 1. Again, it doesn't go like super globe-trotting like the other 2 movies in this franchise, the most recent 2, but it does just enough travel. It does just enough, I guess, expansiveness with what the lore's potential is, that it makes it really entertaining. I know I said I felt really detached from the first John Wick movie, and I do, but I feel like the second one, I do feel detached, but it's in a little bit different of a way. I think the fact that in John Wick 1, he's such a mysterious man to us, and like the Baba Yaga, and like everyone's fearing him, that's cool. The fear is great, but you never really get any context behind that, and for that, I couldn't emotionally connect to the character. John Wick 2, as a very similar thing happens, and that's where I kind of dock points, where it's amazing action. This movie is loads of fun, but emotionally, this one's more for like the peace of mind of John Wick, where it's like he wants to escape this life, and that's been the goal the whole time, but that's like the sole purpose of this movie is he's doing this final assassination, and then he can get out of this life finally. And so I think that, again, these first 2 movies, they just aren't as personal for me, so they don't really work as well. Moving up the list, my runner-up is John Wick 3 Parabellum, coming in at a 9 out of 10. Now, I know for a lot of people, this is their least favorite or second least favorite of the franchise, definitely the bottom half for them. And honestly, I did not like this movie that much when I first saw it in theaters back in 2019. I thought it felt like it lasted way too long, and it just dragged out. A lot of the action sequences were way too long, and I still do believe that dogfight with Halle Berry is a little bit too dragged on, and they don't get as unique, I guess, in the sense that a lot of the moves feel very similar, whereas even in the first two John Wicks, and then obviously the newest one, there's a lot of variety, even if the action sequences take a very, very long time to get through. Aside from that, though, I really love how much globetrotting there is in John Wick 3, yet it still feels like a John Wick is just on this journey. And again, not a very high emotional connection in this movie either, but more than the first two. And also, I feel like it gets so much bigger than just John Wick. Like, it gets to the whole high table, taking everyone down, because this movie starts off right from where the second one left off, where he's excommunicado. And so that whole storyline, the way that you're just thrown right into it, he's on his own, and just that opening, the first 30 minutes is arguably, I mean, actually, I need to rewatch the fourth movie, but the first 30 minutes is arguably the best, like, stretch of just different independent action sequences at one time, because you have the first car chase scene, then you have the book fight with Boban, who's the NBA player, and then you have the knife fight, which is right after that. And so this string of events, these are three completely different types of fights, completely different types of action direction, and it's just completely unique in the first 30 minutes. I definitely do think there is a little bit of an engagement drop off after that first 30 minutes because it's so crazy, entertaining, and different, but I still was really, really loving the lore. And again, if you guys didn't notice, I just really love when they get very expansive with the lore and just tell us so much more about not only characters, but the world building and understanding who's in power of what, all these different locations. I really, really enjoy that aspect of it. And so John Wick 3 is perfect in that sense. But with that being said, in first place for me, my favorite movie in the John Wick franchise is the newly released John Wick 4, coming in at a 9.25 out of 10. Now, the reason there's that 0.25 is because I want to differentiate it from John Wick Parabellum. But anyways, I absolutely love this movie. I've only seen it one time. I do plan to rewatch it though. But like I've been complaining about for the first three movies in this franchise, emotionally, I didn't really connect to anything. I'm going to talk about the general franchise in a second after this, but I haven't emotionally been connected to many storylines here. This movie pretty much introduces all things emotional, from John Wick's friend that it becomes sort of an antagonistic character, to also just the ending of this movie, the closure that the character of John Wick, and honestly this world that they've built up over 4 movies gets. It all feels worth it by the end. And that's not to say these movies weren't great at world building and they didn't satisfy me, because they all satisfied me in many different ways. But this final movie feels like it just wraps up the franchise so well. And maybe it's because I binged all 3 movies like 2-3 days before I started watching John Wick 4. But I really just love how they encapsulate every single aspect of the first 3 movies, from the action to the characters to the set pieces to some even locations and reused characters. They do such an amazing job of just basically taking everything from the first 3 movies and multiplying it times 1,000. Every element that I loved, from even just like car chases, the axe scene in John Wick Parabellum. Obviously, you have that, even the first scene in the house in John Wick 1. You have an implementation of all of these different elements that are so seamlessly put into John Wick 4, while also adding in new elements or just innovating on previous ones. For example, they really started to introduce the sword fighting in John Wick 3, but it wasn't in most of the movie. It was kind of only in the final battle. But in this movie, it's in that big first scene at the other hotel that I don't want to get into any spoilers for you guys, but again, they do a great job of implementing all of these different elements. And obviously, the ending of this movie, in my opinion, very, very emotional. I didn't cry, I didn't tear up or anything like that, but rewatching this franchise right before this movie, I did feel a lot of emotion, but I felt it in the best way possible. I was like, okay, this is what's right for the character, and this is kind of what I am excited to, like, they took a risk, and they knew what they were doing, and it worked out story and character-wise, and also just the pacing of this movie overall, and the way that they kind of lay out not only like different character revelations, but also the action in general. Because if you've seen the movie, you know the final battle, like the actual final battle, is not even really like a battle. Like, it's just a very toned down of honestly a fairly calm situation that, yes, there's a lot of tension in the air, but it's still very calm compared to like the other absolutely insane action sequences that we have earlier in the movie. I do want to rewatch it because I just can't bump it up to like a 9.5, 10 just yet, but just know it is one of the greatest action movies ever made. But guys, that's it for my ranking of all 4 movies in the John Wick franchise. Like I said in the beginning of this video, let me know your ranking for all 4 of these movies in the comments down below. But that's it for all my thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Peace.